pawn e4, pawn e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, pawn a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castles kingside, bishop e7, rook e1, pawn b5, bishop b3, castles kingside, pawn c3, pawn d6, pawn d4, bishop g4, bishop e3, pawn takes d4, pawn takes d4, knight a5, bishop c2, knight c4, bishop c1, pawn c5, pawn b3, knight a5, pawn d5, knight d7, knight b1, d2, bishop f6, rook b1, pawn c4, pawn h3, bishop takes f3, knight takes f3, pawn takes b3, pawn takes b3, queen c7, bishop e3, bishop c3, rook e2, pawn b4, knight d4, rook f8, e8, knight f5, knight b7, bishop d4, pawn g6, knight h6, king f8, rook c1, rook a8, c8, bishop d3, queen a5, rook e2, c2, knight e5, bishop f1, knight c5, bishop takes c3, pawn takes c3, rook takes c3, king g7, knight g4, knight takes g4, queen takes g4, rook b8, rook f3, knight takes e4, queen f4, pawn f5, rook e3, rook e5, rook c6, rook b8, e8, rook takes d6, queen a1, rook takes a6, queen d4, rook d3, Queen b2. Pawn d6. Pawn g5. Queen e3. Pawn f4. Queen a7. King f8. Pawn d7. Rook d8. Queen b6. King e7. Queen takes d8. King takes d8. Rook a8.